Now we're going to move into the second segment of our discussion today, and this is going to focus on heat messaging strategies. And we've got three folks from National Weather Service headquarters to help us out with this. And so this is going to be a little tricky for me because I'm going to kind of try and facilitate while they're presenting. But we have Danielle Nagel, I hope I didn't butcher your last name. We have Kim McMahon, who's just popped on the screen there, and we have Vanessa Pierce. And I'm not sure which one of you is going to be kind of taking the reins here first, but you can let me know.
Hi, Mark. It's Kim. I'll start off first, and I want to say thank you for letting us be a part of this meeting, albeit virtual. It is nice to be able to connect with forecast offices and the staff, and of course, our core partners. So whenever you're ready.
Take it away.
As Mark said, my name is Kim McMahon. I'm the National Weather Service headquarters Public Weather Services Program Manager. So I oversee different hazards such as extreme temperatures, both hot and cold, non-convective winds, air quality, and other various weather-related hazards for the whole National Weather Service. And I'm here with my colleagues Danielle Nagel and Vanessa Pierce to talk about the national heat strategy that we're developing and really to listen to you. So next slide. As I said, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what heat tools you're using, how you're using them, any best practices, any lessons learned. Same thing with how you're receiving and using heat information, whether it be the forecast or the actual watches and warnings. And most importantly for this aspect or this webinar, communicating the impacts of heat. How are you being successful, or do you have any challenges in communicating heat? As we all know, it's a silent killer, and it doesn't get the same attention as, say, tornadoes or even hurricanes, which I know you guys don't have to deal with much, but you get those strong Pacific Northwest storms coming off the coast. So we want to know what successes you have, what lessons learned, what challenges you have, and what gaps we can help you fill. So next slide, and I will turn it over to my colleague, Vanessa Pierce.
Hello, everybody. So first, we're going to start with tools and the heat tools. So some of these you'll be familiar with, and some of them you may not be as familiar with. So first is heat index. That's the traditional heat stress measurement. You've probably heard of it. It's issued daily between May to September. And Stedman put this together, this equation, and it actually incorporates more than just heat and humidity. It also makes different assumptions, such as how much somebody weighs, their height, they're active, walking, they're wearing certain clothing, they have a certain level of heat tolerance, and that they're in the shade. Then we have the Kalkstein Heat Health Warning System. This combines both climatological information with health statistics like the CDC mortality data. And it was developed in the 90s to help public officials, meteorologists, and others predict, respond, and mitigate the impacts of heat waves. It's not necessarily used super common across the country, but a few locations still use it, again, bringing climate and health together. Now we have some of the future tools, and one of them you are probably more familiar with, which is the heat risk that's used primarily in the western region of the National Weather Service. It includes climatology, the duration of heat, overnight temperatures, and those difference between highs and lows. It also incorporates health data from the CDC, and it provides guidance for those who may need to take action below heat product levels. So is this an event that's happening early in the season or even late in the season? Is it something that's abnormal for that time of year? So it's, as I mentioned, again, used in the western region right now, and will be expanding here in the next year or 2 years to the entire country. Then there's wet bulb globe temperature, which you might not be familiar with. It was developed in the 50s by the military, and it estimates the effect of temperature, humidity, wind, and solar radiation on the human body. It's a heat stress indicator that's effective for those active populations. So The military obviously developed it. OSHA uses it as a guide for employers, for those outdoor workers. Athletic training programs and athletic programs all across the country use it both at the collegiate and high school levels. Some states even have used it as their guideline for practices when they're going to practice during the day, and if they can wear certain equipment and so on and so forth. But again, it's active populations. It's you have to have kind of a little insight and specialized knowledge into some of how it works, because it can be a little misleading, but it's a definitely effective tool for different populations. So if you move to the next slide, we're going to ask a couple poll questions here. So first, are you using any of these heat tools to make your decisions regarding heat? So
and this is where I have to make sure I can launch a poll here.
Yes, launch the poll.
I will do it. Now, I have run into problems where the poll results freeze up a little bit. So if I have to do that, I'm going to have to exit the presentation and come back to it. But we'll see if we can get it to work here. All right, the poll should have been launched. So for people who have ability to interact with their computer, you should go ahead and be able to respond to that. And Vanessa, you just tell me whenever you want me to stop polling, all right?
All right. I'll give them a few seconds here.
I wish I had the Jeopardy theme.
Yeah, that's true. And select all that apply, all the ones that you use. All right, I think you can go ahead.
Okay. Bear with me here. Okay. So that's
all right,
what we got.
maximum and duration of the heat event. Okay, good. And then some others. Does anybody want to comment on the others? What other element, what other tools and parameters you use?
Yeah, so you can do this one of two ways. You can either raise your hand and I will unmute you, or you can use the chat or question box and just type it in and I can read it out. We have heat index. Somebody mentioned heat index is one.
Okay.
I don't see any brave souls raising their hands yet.
Okay. That's fine. Just curious to see. I would have thought we might have heard a little more heat risk, but
I do have one here, Caleb Menthorn. I'm going to try to unmute you. I will tell you and warn you, I have run into problems with this before, but I'm going to give it a try here. Okay, you're unmuted, Caleb.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I don't know if you guys use this very often, but I use Ventusky to kind of gauge how hot it is in certain parts of the country here. But I just found out about this a couple of years ago, so I may be late to the party. Ventusky.com. Do you guys use that one very often?
I have never heard of that.
I think it's European. It's European modeling, but I think it's a rather great website. It gives everything: wind, PM 2.5, wind gusts, and temperature. Definitely. I can drop a link into the chat box.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. I could document that and I could send it to you, Vanessa, and Danielle. And
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll move on to, if you want to go back to the presentation.
Yeah, this is where I sometimes have trouble. So Monty Webb, he's one of the media folks up in Tri-Cities. He did comment that we rarely have heat index issues here in the Pacific Northwest. And it is true, we can get pretty hot, but our humidity, our heat index values usually start to tank as our temperatures get above, 95, 100. So let me go ahead and hide the poll here. Okay, we're back.
All right. So have the tools that you've been using been useful in making your effective decisions and or communicating the impacts of heat? So what tools we talked about and are available, are they effective? Or are there ones that we talked about that you're interested in and are like, that might be helpful for me? Just leave it open. So if you raise your hand or unmute yourself or put it in the chat.
Not seeing any hands raised so far.
No brave souls today. All right, well, we can move on to the next slide then. So here we have our heat headline products, our watch warnings and advisories, WAWA as it sometimes is referred to. So there's an excessive heat watch, so conditions are favorable for a heat event in the next 24 to 72 hours. Then you have a heat advisory, where the heat index is forecast to meet or exceed heat advisory criteria for 1 to 2 days. In the north, it's over 100. In the south, it's over 105 generally, with minimum nighttime low temperatures greater than or equal to 75. Then heat warning. That's when the heat index is going to get over 105 in the north and over 110 in the south, with those minimum nighttime temperature lows greater than or equal to 75 again, but this is for at least 2 days. Now, while this is the criteria, I would say generally, because a local office can make adjustments to their criteria based off of different conditions. So remember, we talked about the different tools that are available. So those tools can be used in combination to change their decisions on whether or not they're going to issue a headline, for example. So the heat index might be showing really high values, but when they looked at another parameter, that's not showing as big of an impact, so they might go, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to issue the headline then. But it can also go the other way, where the criteria might not be met, but they're going to issue a headline, an early season event, or when you've had a cooler period and then all of a sudden it's going to get really warm, then a heat headline might be issued just to help and protect the public. So you can move on to the next slide. And we have our next poll, which is, in which methods are you receiving the heat hazard information? So are you getting it from the forecast, whether that's the point and click, the zone forecast, the ZFP, or the hourly weather graph? Our outlooks or discussions, a hazardous weather outlook or enhanced hazardous weather outlook, the area forecast discussion or AFD, our WAWA or our headline products, IDSS briefings or calls, or social media. So, and select all the ones that apply. How are you getting that information?
Yeah, and while folks are chiming in here, we did get a couple of comments on the last bit of questions, just some general thoughts. One from Dave Anderson just says, yes, they're helpful, the heat products. The other one is from Ron Simpson stating, we use heat information with fire weather concerns as well for public messaging. So a lot of times our heat events are very closely related to our fire events out here. And that becomes a big, consideration for those that might be out, fighting these fires, obviously. So certainly something to kind of keep in mind and couple together.
So does that change your guys' office decision then, by chance? Like, will you be more inclined to issue heat headlines with those considerations of fire incorporated?
Well, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I know that our heat advisories typically are tied to the heat risk, and like consecutive days and things of that nature, which is nice in some ways because it takes into account the climatology. So if you have an anomalously hot day in May, for example, it's going to trip that a lot easier than if it's in July or August, because we do get pretty hot here. I think, to be honest, it's one of those things where if we're in a multi-day fire event and it also happens to be fairly hot and dry and windy, it's pretty easy for the heat piece to kind of fall back behind the fire risk piece, but there certainly are elements there that we try to fold in as much as we can. Okay. And I can close the poll if you're ready for me to.
Yeah,
I think people have had time to answer it. All right, share the results here.
All right, so overall, all right, forecast and the headline products, not big surprise, and then the outlooks, and okay, looks pretty good. All right, if you want to go to the next one, will be another poll. And is this typically from the National Weather Service or from other sources?
Oh, sorry about that.
Yep, launch the
Sure.
poll.
Yep.
All right, so do you get it from the National Weather Service, the media, TV or radio, private sector, an in-house meteorologist, whether you hire a private meteorologist or you have one part of your staff, or some sort of other weather professional, or other?
And you tell me whenever you're ready for me to close it.
Yep. I will give them a couple more seconds. All right, you can close it. Oh, 100%. Wow. Okay, great. For the National Weather Service. And then we've got some media and a little bit of everything. For those that selected other, does anybody want to provide feedback on that, where they get it? Oh, we had the one comment from before. Is there any other people that want to say what they use to get the information?
No raised hands so far. I will remind you can use the chat box there as well.
We can go back to the slide, that's fine.
Okay.
So how are the heat hazards and associated impacts communicated with stakeholders and public? So in your position, how do you relay that information, the heat information that you get? So you get it through these different methods, and then you're putting out in some sort of way. How are you doing that? Now it's all open, so unmute or put the questions in the box, or your comments in the box.
We did get a couple of responses to the last question, the other sources. Somebody mentioned the WeatherBug app.
Okay.
And then someone else just mentioned various web pages. So I guess some private sector plugs there. Monty Webb, one of our meteorologists up in the Tri-City, says he gets it from himself.
From
Come on, Monty. I know you're in NWS chat. Not seeing any other hands raised.
No feedback on how they're communicating or messaging it.
Okay, Steve Turcott, he's with Washington Department of Transportation. He's got NWS forecasts, watch warning advisories, NWS briefings, and Northwest Weather Net, which is a private road weather company that they use.
Okay. And how then is that information relayed out? Does he relay it out, or do they relay it out in some sort of way?
Steve, I unmuted you. If you want to chime in, you can. Oh, he says they relay information via Facebook and Twitter. Oh, sorry, that's Liz Jesse. I'm getting all confused here. See, don't make me be the facilitator. Liz Jesse is one of our emergency managers in Walla Walla County, Washington, and they use social media very heavily. So they use Facebook and Twitter to relay that information. Steve, you're unmuted, and I see you're trying to talk, so I'll be quiet now.
My dog and I are competing for the microphone. I rely heavily on email because I'm one emergency manager for all of area code 509 for WashDOT, and email gets to the people who need it, and so I rely on that about 99% of the time.
So you'll get the information, and then do you draft an email, or do you share information? I guess like when you're communicating via email, what are you using to put in the email? Is it just you typing something out, or are you sharing certain things that the Weather Service is providing or some other entity?
I do a weekly situational awareness briefing via email, and that covers things like training opportunities and snow water equivalent in the mountains during the wintertime, and river hydrology now, and fire weather situations in the fire season. And it also includes a PDF of what Pendleton and Spokane send to me and send to us weekly. And then for special situations, urgent watches and warnings and things that come out during the week. Sometimes the Weather Service email gets just simply forwarded, and other times I'll do magic with cut and paste or PDFing or something of that nature.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We had a couple other comments. Monty Webb again, he said broadcast, TV, radio, social media. Sapita, he's emergency management coordinator for Central Washington University. They relay the information via email briefings. And then Liz Jesse, once again, the emergency manager in Walla Walla County, mentioned that they can also relay communication via Everbridge, the emergency notification software.
Okay. And does your office send out briefings, Mark? Yeah,
we do. So if we're coming into a heat event, like I mentioned, a lot of times heat and fire are pretty closely tied together. And we have kind of a separate group of fire weather partners that we get a bit more complicated, or not complicated, but a bit more technical, I should say, with respect to fire weather parameters. So if it's strictly a fire event, most of the information goes to them. If it's a broader event that encompasses things like heat or severe weather, that'll kind of go to a larger catch-all group as well to give them that information. But it's on an event-driven basis, so it's not like every single day. It'd be 2 to 3 days leading into an event, and then daily through the event. And if it's something that's more than just kind of a marginal threat, then we would also do a webinar for that as well.
So you'll put together like some sort of briefing packet and or graphics.
Yes.
And then
yeah.
That. Okay.
It'd either be a one-pager email that would go out via email, like a one-page PDF, or if it's a webinar that we conduct, we would also send the slides out as basically a PDF briefing.
And you said that since like heat and fire are tied together, do you guys incorporate some of that heat information into the fire, like IDSS? Is it part of it when you're providing it? Like, do you provide some of the heat index or heat risk parameters into those?
We will sometimes. No? I mean, occasionally, if typically our fire events are heat plus wind and really low humidity. So in those cases, again, if it's going to be an event that's where heat is a pretty substantial impact, we would include that. There are sometimes events where we don't have much in the way of wind. It's just really hot and the humidity is at 4% or 3%. And in those cases, that's very much more a targeted heat type briefing. And I think we might have had that once or twice last year, and we definitely included the heat risk in there since that's the basis of our advisories.
All right, thank you. We can move on to the next slide and pass it over to Danielle, I think.
So Danielle had to go.
I thought so I figured it would be you, Kim.
It's, the joys of teleworking. So I'll step in for her, but at this point, we really want to talk about the messaging and some examples of outreach and engagement materials. Are you doing seasonal safety campaigns? We have a heat safety website that's on the bottom left that is run by the National Weather Service and has some of the graphics that Mark already mentioned. Then we also are doing some collaboration with other agencies such as OSHA. We have OSHA messaging within our heat products, specifically the call to action statements. And lots of people have mentioned social media, so utilizing that at the national level as well as the local level with the WFOs, and making sure that the offices have graphics to help convey the dangers of heat and heat safety. So you can move on to the next slide. So again, going with the theme of communicating heat, this is where we really just want to have some open discussion, understand your perspective, and like I said before, challenges. So the first question I have for everyone is, what wording or graphics have worked well in communicating the heat hazards and impacts? So what has been really effective in promoting the understanding and people actually taking action to protect themselves from heat? I'll just open it up to the group, either chat box or I'll let Mark unmute people.
I don't see anything specific to your question right now. I do know that in some of the previous questions, a lot of folks have just mentioned those graphics have been really helpful for social media, just to easily be able to kind of redistribute those.
Thanks. It's definitely good to know. And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So at least when people are scrolling in their social media, they're more likely to stop on an image than a whole bunch of text. But so this actually raises my question of how do we know it's worked well? Has it in the case of social media, is it just a lot of resharing or likes or retweeting?
Okay, we do have a volunteer who raised their hand. Sean Davis, emergency manager up in Franklin County. I'm going to unmute you, or try to.
There we go. Hey, thanks, Mark. Yep. I think, yeah, you hit it on the head there that some of it's the amount of retweets, but like Liz had mentioned with Everbridge, we use Code Red, but they're all very, very similar. Part of whether it's worked or not worked too is how many people we have signed up to our systems and how many contacts we make that way as well. So it just seems to be, and Liz is just the quintessential example for this. Your enrollment goes up quite a bit when you have an actual event, but on our end, we've also noticed that our enrollments in message gets out a lot more during actual symposiums and stuff that we have, and Mark's been part of the ones like at the Hanford Safety Fair and those. So that's kind of how we track how well our message is getting out there, if that helps.
Thanks. So you mentioned the symposiums. Are those just held year round, or is it more, we'll say, before the heat season begins or after the heat season has ended? Yeah, I'm trying to understand a time frame and how people are relating to that.
Yeah, so we're fortunate it happens in the spring for us, and our big partner in our area is the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. So it's kind of focused for Hanford stuff, but they allow us to bring in our safety messages as well, which is perfect timing because it's just before fire season. So it'd be ideal if we could do it twice a year and have one for winter preparations as well, but can't get too greedy when they're providing those services out there. The other thing I wanted to mention about the graphics was any type of anything pre-programmed, pre-put together, pre-canned that makes it easily distributable. That kind of helps us out immensely because at least on the EM side, most of our offices are half a person to 4 at most. And so when we have, pre-packaged high quality stuff to put out, makes it just so much easier and we can reach so many more people that way.
That's great feedback. And yeah, we certainly want to make your lives easier. as well, and make sure that the message can get out quickly when needed.
Yeah.
So is anybody else?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add on to what Sean was saying. It's a great opportunity for us too to be able to go. Of course, it was canceled last year, that safety fair. And Sean, I don't remember how many people come out to that, but it's several thousand, correct? And so it's a more in person, kind of informal in person interaction. It's a real nice thing to have.
Yeah, hey, Mark, last time we had it, I believe it was just at 30,000 maybe. I wanted to say 42, but that might have been high. But it's great because of the mix of people and the students that come through and all that whole process. It works out really well.
Yeah, and I know we have specific heat safety, things that we hand out there at that event as well. So it's a good opportunity for us. We had a couple others just mentioned number of likes, shares, number of retweets on Twitter. Monty Webb in Tri-Cities there mentioned that it really depends on who the consumer or how the consumer is consuming the information, as to how they gauge whether or not that message is being received. But
so I asked Monty Webb if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that a little bit.
Unmuted.
Yeah, it really depends on who the consumer might be. Let's say you're giving it to the command center at one of the fires that we have here during our fire season. They want to know very specifically how long can those firefighters be out on the line before we cycle through a new crew versus a high school coach who are having 2 or 3 day football practices the end of August, or a mom who wants to know, is it going to be hot enough or is it too hot to have the kids out at the pool? So it really depends on what we're gearing these products to and how they will be understood and used by the different consumers. So you almost have to tailor make each one of these with the whole mindset of who my audience is going to be. Sometimes some of the stuff that comes out, the watches, the warnings. I know you guys, Weather Service has tried to get better at being more plain language, more easily understood. And that's our job in the media to convey that information. But I think a lot of times folks at Weather Service, they tend to forget, especially in some of the smaller markets, that not every weather person on air is a true meteorologist. So sometimes some of those warnings or advisories tend to get a little muddied, I'll say, as they are then rebroadcasting it. Or you get a radio station or someone else who is just ripping and reading that stuff, or even sometimes the emergency management offices. If those things aren't geared specifically for that clientele, or if they're not plain language, I think sometimes, I don't think, I know, I've seen where there's miscommunication of the information. It's something is lost in that retransmission of whatever product that you guys have issued. Does that make sense?
I think so. I do have a follow-up question.
Okay.
Would you say that the confusion or lack of plain language is usually with the, and this is talking about heat, sticking with heat, would you say that's more in the, what's going to happen or how hot it's going to be versus the what people should be doing, what actions they should be taking?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit, but I think you were asking, is it understanding what the forecast is and what actions they should be taking?
Yes.
I think generally the forecasts are pretty straightforward. I mean, it's like around here, we've got a heat advisory for 100 to 105. Overnight temperatures are going to meet that minimum. Again, we don't ever have a heat index, so that's a non-issue here. But I guess taking those issues, because around here in the summertime, we always get a couple of stretches where, we'll be 100 for 5 or 6 days in a row. We might hit 115. and people, you have these heat advisories, and we always convey that because you don't want someone out there working, but they do anyway outside of all of this heat. I guess just some of that information or how to convey that on what people should do, the general public. I mean, I think at fires and things, they try to take that type of a forecast and that advice, and hopefully they're able to cycle through those firefighters and get them that break that they need. But I think the general public, they'll look at that or they hear that, because I get all this all the time on my social media. Oh, it's supposed to be 105. Well, it's the Tri-Cities. We get hot. Why is that a big deal? So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And it actually leads beautifully into the second question of, what challenges have you seen in communicating heat hazards and impacts? And I'll tell you, out of the other offices that we've been able to join in on these types of meetings and webinars, they have the same issue, nationwide, of people don't always take heat as seriously as they probably should. And, this is where we're coming to you to find out, have you had any really great success stories of where, people are taking those precautions? Or is it really just, like you said, people go about their day and they're just like, oh, well, it's hot. It's the summer. It's supposed to be hot. How can we change that? How can we make people take action and really listen?
Yeah, I would think that hitting some of the worst case scenarios of what can happen with even a normal summer heat where we are at 105. I'm constantly reminding people, always check that back seat. How many times a year do we hear about someone leaving a child or a pet in their car? So those are the type of things that you have to constantly be reminding people. Again, because we don't have the humidity here, you don't have the issue with the heat index, but always reminding, hey, check on your elderly neighbors or your friends to make sure they're okay. But again, here in the Tri-Cities, if it's 105, if you can sit in the shade, you're going to be significantly cooler. It's not Kentucky or it's not Texas where you sit in the shade and instead of 98, it still feels like 98 in the shade because of the heat index. So.
I appreciate all your comments and all the input. Wanted to see if there's anybody else out there who has comments and further discussion or points that they want to make.
Well, while folks are getting their thoughts together, I would second that comment about the back seat. It doesn't have to be all that hot outside for that, to be incredibly dangerous. The heat index doesn't really matter. The outdoor temperature really doesn't matter all that much in that case. And so I don't have the stats in front of me, but, I would suspect that because it's, relatively cool here, the climate up here being dry as it is, that, you may unfortunately see people, not take that threat as seriously, leaving children in the car, elderly in the car, pets in the car. But that's a very good point. So.
Yeah, Mark, I believe the average annual pediatric vehicular heat stroke death is 38 per year.
Okay.
38 children are left in cars or trapped in cars and unfortunately perish.
Yeah, we have one comment here from Liz Jesse again, just saying posts about children and pets in cars seem to get lots of shares on Facebook, she says.
So being able to post more about the children, check before you lock or look before you lock. Doing that, I'd say periodically throughout the season is something that we've heard is helpful, and everyone here has kind of supported the fact that that message does get lots of shares. So hopefully the message is getting across more and more. But this brings me to the third question of, what other improvements would you like to see in regards to heat messaging and communication within your community? And another way of looking at this is, what's your ideal heat messaging strategy or system? What does that look like? I know if it were an easy question, we'd have already done it.
Not seeing any hands raised so far. Monty, I think that's an old hand raised there, but you can unmute yourself if you want to talk some more. I think I might have accidentally advanced the slide or gone back. I'm not sure. Cam, you hit or let me know probably.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Monty says, I'm good.
So we still have this problem of, unfortunately, heat is the #1 killer, weather-related killer in the United States. So what are things that in an ideal world, you get to be emperor or empress for a day and figure out how you would like messaging of heat and the related hazards to go? What mechanisms could be in place to help spread the word, to help people take action? And really, again, it's a silent killer, so it doesn't always seem like we're being heard as much as we're trying to inform people, hey, it's going to be hot, you need to take breaks in the shade, as you mentioned, Monty, or you need to just make sure that you have your keys on you and your kids can't accidentally get into the car without your knowledge.
Liz Jesse did have a comment here. Said National Weather Service Pendleton is doing a great job of communicating on social media. As mentioned before, their graphics are informative and ready to share. I guess me speaking personally from the Weather Service standpoint, and I know you're trying to get at the partners, and I'm just kind of giving them some more time to think about it, I guess.
Mark, we want to hear from you too.
Well, personal standpoint, I having lived in different parts of the country, growing up in Florida, where the humidity is like 80% all the time, heat index is a thing every day. I sense that people don't take it as seriously up here as they would in the South, where they're kind of hit with it at least more severely for a longer period of time. And maybe the offices you've talked with down there would disagree with that. I don't know. I just feel like we have a fairly protracted summer here. It's about 2 months where you have a threat of triple-digit temperatures. But in those cases, you're not, actual temperature is feeling cooler. So I just have a sense that people don't take it as seriously as maybe they otherwise might. And I'm not sure how to make them take it seriously. I think we can share as much information as we possibly can. But then they have to take that, and keep it in mind. So I think as a best practice, periodic reminders that, hey, heat does kill a lot of people. You got to take it seriously. Even if you live in a climate that overall is fairly temperate, it does get hot here.
Thanks, Mark. I think you really just indicate that we need more research. You know, we need research community to help us figure out some of the messaging and behavioral aspects that we as meteorologists are not experts in. Okay, so I'm actually gonna toss it over to my colleague, Dr. Danielle Nagel, and she's got the last few poll questions. So next slide, and Danielle, take it away.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. And so I'm just gonna start up some conversation here around outreach and education. And apologies, I had to step away briefly to pick up my son from school. So if you've covered any of this already, you can just tell me again, and we can go over it again. But to start out here and to kick off the conversation, we do have a poll. I believe it's our last one. So if you can get that up and running, Mark.
Yes, I'm doing it right now. It is the last one. I was about to start sweating if you told me there was 3 or 4 more. I'm like, I don't have those, but I got this one here. So I'll go ahead and launch it. And you just tell me when you want me to close it, okay?
Sounds good, thanks. Yeah, so we would like to know, if you conducted any heat outreach or education type events or things throughout the year. So again, this is one of those select all that apply. We're interested in what the context was around those too. So yes, it's leading into a forecasted heat event. So it's really trying to talk about that one event. Or yes, but it's more annual pre-season outreach, just to get people ready for that warmer season. Obviously, no is an option here where you haven't done this sort of outreach before. And if we're not thinking of something, feel free to hit other and then tell us about it when the poll closes. So I'll just give you another second or two here to think about your answer and finish it up. Okay, Mark, if it looks like it's slowing down, you can go ahead and close it and share results.
Yeah, I'm doing that right now. And I apologize if you hear some popping in the background. My wife is heating up her lunch, so. Okay, let me share the results here.
Awesome, see it now, thank you. Okay, so it looks like you guys are doing some outreach and education. So 58% of you leading into a forecasted heat event, okay? And 25% doing some annual preseason outreach. There is a good number of you that aren't doing anything. And from the tail end of the conversation I caught when Kim was talking just now, it sounds like heat is it's an issue everywhere, but maybe you guys have bigger fish to fry a lot, and your summer season's a little bit truncated. So I understand that it might not be on the top of the priority list. But I just want to open it up now and let you guys comment on your choice here and talk a little bit more openly on what your outreach efforts are like. And I say outreach, it doesn't have to be any big workshop or public campaign, even just putting together materials, passing out handouts, a social media post, whatever it may be. We'd love to hear a little bit more about how you guys more generally get the word out about heat and the risks surrounding it. So I'll give everyone a couple seconds to digest and raise hands or put questions in. Anything coming through?
Danielle,
Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, I'm just waiting on folks here to comment and raise their hands. We've had a couple of takers on the raising of hands, but mostly been in the chat box. Sapita, he's the emergency management coordinator for Central Washington University, says that they do social media posts and they have an e-newsletter for the university that they will supplement with heat information.
Great, thank you.
Liz Jesse, she's the emergency manager in Walla Walla County in Southeast Washington. She says, we don't generally do anything heat specific. It's more of an all hazards approach, but we do national night out, some community festivals and things of that nature. So there's an in-person presence to provide information. Sean Davis, up in Franklin County, your hand is raised, so you are unmuted. Go ahead and talk.
So yeah, kind of what Liz was saying, in one of the other resources we forgot to mention that we take advantage of as well is through, and I don't know if it was mentioned before or not, but Base Camp through Washington Military Department. They have just a ton of, I guess, a huge library of pre-canned, ready to go items to share, and this is one of them as well. It's kind of like we're in that flavor of the month kind of deal. So if there's really nothing going on, these are great fillers, you know, to put out just to keep people interested. So we do that. And then, as we had discussed before, some of the other outreach items we do, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that was another resource. We kind of forget about it because we always, it's there and we take advantage of it and don't realize some other people may not know about Base Camp and what Kiana at EMD is doing.
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting resource. Is there a website or something you could chat that we could take a look at?
Yeah, I'll try and dig up a link for you and put it in chat.
Awesome, thank you.
And I'll
Mark,
share. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I was just going to say I'll share those URLs. We had a couple people type in. There was a resource that someone mentioned before. They monitor heat information on, and then if Sean gets that, I can also share that with you as well.
Okay, great. And you can put it back to the slide if you want. There was a couple like more open-ended questions we can have up while we chat.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. So it sounds like, oh, go ahead.
We did have one other comment I was just going to throw out there. It's from Monty Webb, and I know you were gone there for a bit. So he's one of the broadcast meteorologists up in the Tri-Cities area. And he says he always tries to do some type of education, you know, on his broadcast a few days before and then throughout each heat event that we have.
Okay, great. So yeah, I mean, these last two questions here kind of dig a little bit deeper into this. So, you know, how you're making decisions on what the main topics are going to be, the audiences, the venues. For the most part, it's sounding like heat is added on when it's like seasonally appropriate and when you have the space and the time, rather than full out heat events that or heat outreach events that center around heat. But you know, if there are any more details you can share on how you make decisions when it comes to heat outreach and education, even, and it's not listed on here, but even content wise, you know, like, do you feel like you have what you need to share with the public? Do you feel, is there something you're wishing you had when it comes to heat to put out there? Statistics, graphics, anything else that would be useful?
Monty Webb, I see your hand is up, but I don't know if that's an old hand or if that's a new hand. Looks like an old hand. Okay.
All right, well, you can keep thinking on that. I'll also throw in the last question here so that, you know, you can, if anyone has any comments on this as well, you can jump in. We're also curious what sort of collaboration happens with these types of activities. So, you know, who are you collaborating with? The local forecast office, another agency or organization? Are you collaborating across different types of boundaries, borders? What do you do to pull things together? And, you know, I mean, I guess we can go beyond heat too. So if you have a typical outreach event or campaign that you tend to do, how do you put it together? You know, what sort of collaboration occurs? And is it something that, you know, if you don't have heat involved now, are you interested in doing that in the future?
Hi, this is Sean. Can you hear me?
We can.
So I guess there's two sides of it. On our business side for emergency management, we have annual conferences. So Partners in Preparedness, which is usually held over on the west side of the state, covers just a plethora of topics for emergency preparedness. And then also through our Washington State Emergency Management Association, there's a conference every year that goes over a same thing, just a number of preparedness stuff and highlights of events and responses throughout the year or previous year. So that's kind of one way we do it. And then previously we had talked about some of the symposiums and public things we hold and have out there. So.
Great, thanks. Thanks for sharing, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like Liz Jesse wanted to chime in here. I'm going to unmute you, Liz. All right, you should be able to unmute yourself now, Liz.
There, can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. We also do Firewise meetings in the spring at various locations, kind of heat related, but we do look at the projections for fire season. And we partner with Oregon Department of Forestry and DNR and U.S. Forest Service and our folks at the fire districts to do those meetings. So it's kind of heat related, but more from the fire side.
Great, thank you.
And Danielle, I know you were gone for part of the conversation when Kim was kind of facilitating, but I was noting how a lot of our heat events are fairly closely coupled with our fire events, and a lot of times the fire piece kind of overshadows the heat. So, you know, sometimes it's hard to really strip out that heat risk from the wildfire risk, because that's kind of the red flag on everyone's mind, not to make a terrible pun, but that's kind of the, you know, the thing that people pay the most attention to. So just for reference.
And,
yeah.
And we typically can communicate those red flag warnings. I have an email distribution group of all the fire agencies, and so some of them get that information directly from our dispatch folks, but I've talked to some of the rural fire district chiefs, and they find that the emails are helpful for situational awareness.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of great things going on. It's not necessarily focused on heat, but at least you have the kind of bones there if you need to at any point or want to include heat. You have those partnerships and those dissemination methods already in place, which is great.
And our state emergency management is really good about pushing out information when there's severe weather anticipated. So sometimes it's straight off the National Weather Service website, but we will get that information sometimes from the Weather Service directly, but also through the alert and warning from the duty officer at the Washington State Emergency Management Office.
Okay. Well, Mark, I want to be cognizant of the time. I don't know how hard a stop most people have, and we're coming up on 4 o'clock our time.
Yeah, we still have 33 folks on. I mean, a number of them are from our office, but I think a fair number did jump off close to 1. I think several had other obligations, but you know, it's open to you, however much time you want to spend on it, and however much time people want to stick around.
Well, I don't want to cut anyone off. So, is there any other comments coming through or hands raised?
I guess even people at the office, like if you have comments, it's not just for the partners, it's also for those in the FO. We want to hear from you too, what you want to see or what you think could change and what would be helpful, or what are the challenges that you face communicating the information.
Well, this is Sean again. One thing that I haven't heard mentioned, and it may have been earlier, but one of the issues that I know I have, my county is over 50% Spanish speaking. So we have a very, very large Hispanic population as well as migrant population. And so that was one thing kind of missed saying earlier about the infographics and that, and how like on social media, how I think Mark, you had said how a picture just explains so much. So a good portion of our Spanish speaking folks don't even read Spanish very well. They speak it, but it's not exactly quite the same when it comes across with the English translations here. And so the pictures do help, but I had mentioned earlier how the prepackaged, ready to go type of infographics and information, it just helps us get information out on social media so much faster versus trying to, me with very little experience trying to get it out on social media or on a website or out, I lean heavily on the local media to transmit that information for us, but it sure would be nice to ensure we have a repository of where we can go and pick out pre-canned information in multiple different languages.
At least for the Spanish stuff on the website that Mark had showed earlier, there is some of the pre-canned safety messages that the Weather Service has are available in Spanish as well. So that is an option.
And Sean, I will note as well, and this is relatively new development for me personally, but there has been for a while a team within the National Weather Service is made up of people all across the country. It's the Multimedia Assistance in Spanish team. And so if there's a specific targeted objective that you have that you're kind of interested in investigating, developing or translating something, that, is something we could possibly, consult that team on. I know one of the team leaders that we could look into possibly developing something. But
good to know. Thanks, Mark.
And I don't know, I know Seattle, NWS Seattle has done a good amount with other languages too. I'm not sure specifically which resources they have available, and I'm sure Logan could provide a whole insight into it, but that might be another resources for other languages.
Anybody else have any additional comments on anything, not just this slide, but anything that we've talked about? I can go on to our final couple slides here and just briefly cover it if there's enough of you out there still listening.
yeah, we still have 28 folks on, and I've unmuted everybody. I mean, it's small enough now, I think it's safe. So if anybody has anything they want to say, I think it's small enough you can just unmute yourself and start chatting.
Okay, well, yeah, feel free to interrupt at any point. I'll just go through our last little bit here just so that you guys are aware. I'm sure Kim covered some of this. I know she covered some of this earlier. So where are we going with this? All of these discussions that we're having with various communities, offices across the country will really be informing our unified heat strategy. So at the headquarters level at Weather Service, we're building the strategy out for what our heat program can look like in the future and what the opportunities are there. So again, goal is to create and implement this program that really improves our service products and communication. And so these conversations with partners and with our forecast offices are particularly crucial, really, to helping us understand what the needs are out there. You know, how are we able to support at that national level, and you know, what are all the inputs and requirements coming into us, and how can we make it better? So that's the end goal here. And you can go on so that everyone has our contact info. So, you know, thank you guys. Thank you for sticking around and for all of the input. And you have all of our emails here. Please feel free to reach out. But we're happy to stick around for a little bit longer if you guys have any other comments or questions.